Well, it seems obvious that, one of the causes, the distal causes, I would say clearly, is the promotion of the birth control pill. But even that is a somewhat shallow answer, because there's a very specific set of social and economic realities, zeitgeist, that even made the invention and distribution and acceptance of the birth control possible, right? You had to have the psychological stage set for the acceptance of that technology, the demand for that technology, before it could be developed or implemented. And so, so you started the documentary, you're in chapter 1, you're starting to ask people what's going on. What are they telling you?
Yeah, well, no one had a clear answer, and that, maybe that was overly simplistic, but what I was trying to do was find some common thread. But let me just, if I can, talk about contraceptives, because there's a wonderful counterexample. The contraceptive pill was not legalized in Japan until 1990. And it was only legalized because Viagra was legalized. And at that point, women said, wait, you've been blocking the contraceptive pill and now you're allowing Viagra. And at that point, it was made accessible.
So you had the precipitous decline in birth rate.
From 73, you had an increase in mass abortions. So this was a societal issue with or without.
Right. So that shows that it's something deeper than this.
Something deeper. And also, if you look at other countries, particularly UK at the time, France to the US, where you also had access to the contraceptive pill, you were not seeing falling birth rates. And a lot of people would say, well, it's obvious it was industrialization. It was something to do with urbanization. But the correlations aren't there. If you look at, well, why did this only happen in those 3 countries? And the answer comes back to, I'd love people to see it unfold in the documentary, but it's a sudden increase in this unplanned involuntary childlessness happened in Germany, Italy, those countries at the same time.
Well, it's definitely the case that as women become more educated, they have fewer children. And that's now the precise causal pathway there isn't obvious. One simple suggestion would be that it is a matter of accidental delay. I've seen this in my daughter. My daughter, although she had terrible health problems and that complicated her life a lot, she had initially thought that she might want to go be a physician. But that's like 12 years. And she was also very oriented towards having children. And she's managed to have 1 child despite her health problems. But that desire to pursue an intense educational pathway does exist in conflict, certainly with an early start to family development. If you presume that doesn't matter because you've got time, you're not going to find out that isn't true for 10 years in your own life, and maybe the culture won't find out that's true for like 30 years. We still tell young women who are 19. I made a comment that was clipped on an Instagram reel by someone about the fact that we always lie to young women about what's going to be important in their lives. We tell them it's going to be all career. I said, I've worked in female-dominated industries my whole life, and what I've observed is, among men and women alike, that it's a very rare person for whom career is the most important thing in their life, even if they're men, although it's true for more men. It's true for virtually no women by the time they hit 30. And the amount of vitriol that comment generated was unparalleled. And that's something, because I've had plenty of vitriol generated from things I said, but it was all young women, talking about how some old white guy like me had no right to tell young women what to do with their bodies, which I most certainly was not. But it is, you can see a simple pathway there, right? It's like, well, we have this avenue where we can pursue our career and our education and everything else we want, and then we'll be able to solve the problem of having a family. The problem with that is, well, it's hard enough to find a mate when you're 23, 24. By the time you're 30, it's even more difficult. And by the time you're 35, it's starting to become well nigh impossible to find a mate and get pregnant and have a family, especially if you're going to have more than 1 kid. And so there's a direct conflict there between the avenues that are open to women and the need to strike while the iron's hot on the reproductive front. Nobody really knows how to reconcile that. I mean, it's odd because women will live about 7 years longer than men. So it could be the case that the societal norm could be that women have their children when they're quite young and then go back to school in their 30s. That would actually work out. In principle, that could work out quite nicely, but we don't have the norms in place to make that a possibility.
But we have to start addressing exactly this, because if we don't, to me, I mean, there's so many ideas today about reproductive technology that are overstated.
Oh,
the idea
yes,
freeze your eggs and age 40. If you have a partner and if you still have energy, that you might then.
Yes, and everything goes well.
Yeah, if everything goes well.
And you have the money.
Yeah,
and the emotional stamina.
All of that. So part of what I'm hoping to do through the documentary and my work after this is to just increase awareness, particularly to women, but you need a man as well, so it's both, that the fertility window is much shorter and the ability to have children gets harder and harder and harder. It's not just about getting pregnant, it's about being able to deliver, being able to see the pregnancy through to, which gets exponentially harder very, very quickly. I should mention I interviewed 5 fertility doctors for the documentary itself. Each one of them wanted to open up about the challenges, because normally they have to sell their services.
Right.
Normally they have to tell people, think positively, here's what we've done for other people, here's what we think we can do for you.
Yeah.
What they were telling to me openly, I'm frankly getting quite emotional about on a couple of occasions, was it's terrible because so often it doesn't work out.
Well, 1 in 3 couples by the age of 30 have pronounced fertility problems, defined as inability to conceive within a year of embarking on the endeavor consciously. Right, so that's 1 in 3. And of course, it just gets worse and worse as age creeps up. And 30 is not that old. And it does mean that women have a damn tight window. It's 13 years, let's say, by the time you're 17. By some standards, you're mature enough to consider reproduction, 17 or 18, and on the extreme end. And then, 35 is the other end of that distribution. And you're playing with fire by the time you're delaying, especially if you don't have a partner, by the time you're delaying till 35.
Especially if you want 3 children,
Yeah, well, right. I'm thinking just 1, and it's also the case. I think if you're a reasonable observer of human nature, you see that people have 3 sources of fundamental gratification in their lives. One is the pursuit of their own interests, including career and job. One is their intimate relationship, and the other is their family. And obviously, the intimate relationship and the family are very integrally associated. And if you miss out on one of those, you may be able to fill it by exceptional ability in the remaining domains. But for most people, not only is that highly unlikely, it's also highly undesirable. So,
because to take the point as well, here am I, an older male talking about things that are very sensitive to women, but there are a lot of women out there saying the exact same thing. And there was one this morning. I got an email from Melanie Notkin, who's written a book called Otherhood, who herself has no children, and she put it succinctly that, in her words, women are going through the education path, the career path, to try to ultimately fall in love and have a family.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's all linked.
Yeah, well, I think it's the same for men.
I think so too.
It's more than that. Half the reason that men strive for career success is to impress women and attract them. In fact, it's higher than that. So,
but maybe that point is the heart of the problem we have today, because today, if you look at who's at college and who's actually earning more right now, I read this morning, women in cities in the US are earning more than men. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but you have this situation.
Yeah, it's right under 30. Yeah.
So in US colleges right now, there are, I believe it's 9.5 million women and around 6.57 million men.
Oh, and the women start dropping out of college, by the way, when they start to outnumber the men 2 to 1. Right? Because a lot of the reason people go to college, you got to ask yourself, what's college for? It's like, well, it's to get educated, to go to lectures, to be accredited. It's like, no, probably not. Probably the reason people go to college is to find a mate. and there's a selected pool there, and you have a decent chance of finding someone, of approximately your ability and forward-looking vision, let's say. And the reason people are willing to shell out between $150,000 and $250,000 for 4 years is in no small part so that they can find a mate. Well, and if you demolish that by, radically decreasing the number of available men, for example, you're just going to blow the whole enterprise out of the water, which is already what's happening.
Absolutely. And this is perhaps my greatest concern.